KBIS Luxury Lounge. We're so excited to see all of you here today. I'm your moderator. I'm Stacey Shoemaker-Rowan. I'm the editor-in-chief of Hospitality Design magazine and the senior vice president of content for our design group at our parent company, Emerald, which we help produce KBIS and KBB magazine. So really excited to be here. And this panel, I think, is really important, and I'm excited to have this conversation. It's called The Power of Purpose, Luxury Design and Social Responsibility. And we're going to dive into how these two can coexist at the same time, and we have two experts on that. Speaking of that, I want to introduce our sponsor for the event, Cosentino. And Cosentino, if you don't know, is the global leader in sustainable surfacing. Their incredible brand, it's an incredible brand. I hope you visit them at booth 2019 to experience all their high design, innovative products like Silestone and Decton. Since they've been founded, Cosentino has been recognized as an industry leader in design for sustainable product development as well as sustainable manufacturing. Thank you, Cosentino, and we're really excited to have Patty Dominguez here to join this panel. So, Patty, why don't you start? And also, we have Joe Wong, who's the co-founder of OWIU Design. Thank you so much. But Patty, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about more about Cosentino, how long you've been there, and your role.
Okay, well, good afternoon, I guess. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. First of all, I mean, how fun to have this little luxury lounge. I was walking up and I thought, I wonder if there'll be anyone here. And then It was full and I thought, ooh, maybe we're popular. And then I realized everyone just needed a little break. They needed to sit down and have some lunch. So I agree with you. I take it. But I'm glad you're here regardless of the reason. Hopefully it will be an enjoyable time for you. As Stacey said, my name is Patty Dominguez. I am the Vice President of Business Development for Cosentino Americas. And I've been with the company for 18 years. I started with the company in the kitchen and bath world. So I ran the kitchen and bath business, or I started with kitchen and bath kind of like as we developed into the new distribution of our products. Back then, we only had Silestone and Natural Stone, and then I ran the commercial business, all of our project business that we call commercial, and then for the last 10 years, I've really been focused on the designer community, designer business with kitchen and bath and designers. And over the last year and a half, I've had the opportunity to really just touch on all the different business segments. And one of my highlights really of working with this amazing business, with a amazing company, family business, has been developing the relationships with our partners, brand partners, and all of the different companies that we work with, the associations, and then, of course, the designers. So that's what I do. Cosentino, if you have not visited, as Stacey said, we have some wonderful products to show you, and hopefully you'll have a moment to go by our booth.
Thank you, Patty. All right, Joel, can you tell us a little bit about you and your firm and how you got to where you are today?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming down today. So I'm Joel Wong. I'm one of the founders of OWIU Design, which is an abbreviation for The Only Way Is Up. So we are a architecture, design, and build company based in Los Angeles. We focus a lot on home remodels and all the way down to commercial stores to new builds. And we primarily, our ethos focuses a lot on careful craftsmanship and thoughtful design, where design doesn't necessarily have to be a paper churning kind of system, but if we do put in the consideration and thought into the lifespan or the life cycle of a project, which I think we'll touch on a lot later today, there can be benefits to both the owner, to the environment, to the overall built environment. So that's just a rough gist of what we do in the firm.
They have beautiful work. You should check out their website. I was oohing and awing over it this morning. So since this panel, and we'll get to some of the stuff you just touched upon, but let's start with one question. Since this conversation is surrounding luxury and sustainability and, more importantly, social consciousness, It's not an easy question, but one I think we should start with. What is your definition of luxury today, and how has that evolved over the past 5 years from your point of view? Patty, I don't know if you want to tackle that one, or Joel.
Yeah. So I think there's always a wrong consensus of like luxury means expensive. I feel like luxury can be thought through design and thought through specifications, not necessarily speccing expensive Calcutta marble all over the place, but it can be something that is like, if we talk about texture, if we talk about natural materials, if we think about dating all the way back to like even the Roman or the Italian Renaissance times, right? You're using natural materials that not necessarily has to be expensive. And I would say that us as designers in general, I feel like there's that responsibility placed on us to offer these kind of suggestions, or even suppliers, for instance, like what are the materials that are available, right? If you think about the entire ecosystem of the built environment, if suppliers are creating unavailable products that are not environmentally focused or consciously sourced, then the final consumer at the end of the day only has X amount of choices, right? So I think that responsibility is placed on both, the designer and the supplier. Yeah.
Add
I
anything?
mean, I agree with that. I think luxury is such a, I think when you think of expensive, and like you said, Joel, you can immediately think, okay, if it's expensive, it's got to be luxurious. But there's so much beauty out there with luxury, and some of the products that are made in order for us to be functional and responsible. And when you have that in that luxurious space, I think that we have to be a little more provocative. And what I hear, I am not a designer. I hear this from the design community of consistently, I think that now with technology being more accessible and in the digital world, you have the ability to look at these different, you have ability to really educate yourself about how to make something look beautiful without necessarily being expensive, but look luxurious and be able to live with it, that it's functional to your needs.
And I love how you said thoughtful. We talk a lot about it, like thoughtful design, and really kind of taking a step back and really thinking about where A, to spend the money, and B, do you have to make it feel luxury?
Yeah, for sure.
So, and you mentioned sustainability, and I know it's so important to Cosentino. So do you want to talk a little bit about how that's woven into the ethos of the company?
Yeah, so I am passionate about this because back in, some of you I think have had the opportunity to visit our factory in Spain. We are from a small town called Macael in the southeast of Spain. And this little town, if you visit it, and if you haven't, we would love for you to see it. But the ecosystem around it has forced us from the very beginning to be a sustainable company. So we're not sustainable because 10 years ago people started talking about sustainability. We are sustainable because, one, we have to be. Our president and owner has always been super conscious of it. Because of where we're located, water is an essential need to where we are. And so the reuse of water and the reuse of energy. One of my favorite things to see is the reforestation of our quarries and their solar panels. And so we are surrounded by solar panels. We are surrounded by being able to give and provide back to the town the water usage. And so that's always been how we've manufactured and what we've done from the beginning. It's not something new. However, obviously throughout the years, the sourcing of our materials, the recycled materials that we use with all of our products, is the other part of the sustainable way of how we manufacture. So again, for Cosentino, it's not something new. It's just something that's embedded in us from the beginning.
And how are you pushing sustainability in your research and your product innovation?
So we, in our research and development team at Cosentino, based in Spain, we're really pushing this by continuing to allow people to be a little bit more transparent with what the sources are of all the materials that we use in our products. So one of the materials that we're showing at the at KBIS right now is called Inlayer. And if you've been to the booth, you might have seen it. It's gorgeous. It's a new category, a new product. It's not Decton, it's not Silestone, and I can't tell you what it's going to be yet. But what it is it's a product that has less than 1% silica, so no silica, and 90% of all of the materials are recyclable. And so this has been, for us, it's, I always like to say we don't sacrifice beauty with sustainability, and I think that Inlayer is the perfect way to show what we are able to do, kind of pushing that envelope in bringing these products to market.
And how has that evolved to form and function, meeting, and being able to create more sustainable but still luxury product? I mean, how has that evolved over the past couple of years, especially for Cosentino?
I think technology, the evolution of technology, obviously, but also the resources. I mean, in the end, we have, I think, Joel, you said it best. I mean, we have to be conscious, and we have to be, to be really open about what it is that is needed. And it evolves because it can be. And as long as you don't, we want to bring the best colors, and they have to perform. And then you have to be able to have the ability to have something in your home, whether it's you're using it for a fireplace or a backsplash or a countertop or a bathroom space. I think we all want materials that you can use for a long time, and that durable, and that they're functional. And that is what we do at Cosentino, is really think of the functionality of it in order for it to stay looking beautiful and luxurious.
And how does it wear? And, how does a patina, what happens with it? So,
Yeah.
100%. And so, perfect segue for you, Joel. And I know sustainability is very important to your firm and social responsibility. So, how do you approach it? How do you start a project and start looking at products for, to use in your next project?
Yeah. So I think there's a big correlation between sustainability and longevity as well. Being in the home remodel. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, this is your head? Oh, that's mine. Being in the home remodeling space, I think even in light of the fires, right? Recent fires, which we are assisting quite a lot of homeowners for their rebuilding process, we start to think about like the life cycle of a home. For example, if you were to remodel a home that was built in the mid-centuries, for instance, 50, 60, 70 years, when you walk in the space, the first thing you question is like, what are the things that you want to keep, or what are the things that you have to throw? And I think that's where it gets more in depth in terms of like, what are the materials that are things that have that lifespan of like past 50 years or 70 years or 100 years, right? So I think when you think about that whole idea of longevity, like after 50 years of use, right, sure, maybe it's time to change, right? And making sure that with the right waste disposal systems, like it's not landing up in a landfill or something synthetic that is going you don't know where, right? So I think understanding the overall ecosystem of the lifespan of a material, for instance, is quite crucial. And for us as a practice, of course, like we would always try to preserve what we can. Whatever we can preserve, we will think about it, whether it's countertops to kitchen cabinetry to flooring to tile. I think knowing your overall like footprint in the landfill or in or whatever what you're consuming is really, really crucial. And yeah, like I feel like being a designer, that's kind of we provide these suggestions, and not only does it create a space that has more soul and more character from the past, which I think is crucial, right? It also reduces costs for the owner. I think it's like a major win-win situation. Yeah.
And I'd love to add something to that. I mean, I'd love to even just ask. I know some of you in the audience, but I feel like 10 years ago, we were talking about this, but people really weren't doing it. And price was a big part of this, right? Like everyone was so, I want to be sustainable until the price was shown. And then it was like, well, maybe not so much. And I feel like that has changed. I feel like now people are way more conscious. The end consumer is, but the designers are. So I don't know, maybe raise your hand if you feel that in the last, few years that you really are thinking of your projects and it's important to you. And maybe it's not, but I'd love to hear that because I feel like we're constantly being challenged as a manufacturer to bring these, but then at the end, it's not always something that people really care about. So not to put you on the spot, but maybe a little show of hands that you feel. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you're
For
the
sure.
designer here,
Yeah.
but I'm putting you on the spot
Yeah.
for sure. But
No, definitely. For sure. I mean, being an architect, I feel like a big part that a lot of people don't know is that we are responsible for the budget, right? Every design phase, we do need to assess the budget and know that whatever specifications we involve in, like we know that it's going to keep to a certain budget for the owner, and definitely understanding the cost, right, all the overall project as a whole. How do we make sure that fits within a certain budget and cost? Yeah.
And I wonder too, how many of your clients are asking for it too? And are you pushing this? Is not pushing, but are you suggesting more sustainable products beyond the construction, right? Like, are you suggesting more sustainable products to layer in, or are they asking for it? Or, I mean, I know it's project by project, and but overall, like a rough estimate.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a dialogue. There are clients that kind of feel like they want to select specifications that, whether it's vintage, let's say if it's from a furniture perspective, right? But from a new build perspective, I think we are the ones that always have to be at the forefront of educating a client on what longevity and the idea of the lifespan of a material selection can be like, and like you mentioned, like how it patinas over the years, and how it kind of ages beautifully over time. Yeah.
It's interesting. And so, how are you finding products beyond Cosentino that are, sustainable? That how are you and your team researching them and finding? Because a lot of it, as you said, is the life cycle, right? It's the story behind it, and not only what materials are being used, but like how is it produced, where is it produced? So, how are you teaching your team to research these, or yourself, and what do you look for?
I would say we go through a pretty rigorous process, and I mean, as you can see, look around you, there's so many products to pick from, and creating that library, that the material library that could, like, you're just gonna keep having all this deluge of information and products that you begin to filter through. And for us, we definitely want to understand where it came from and who's making it, most importantly, and understanding the source of the product, and like whether there are certain practices involved in terms of and the environmental consideration. I would say that how we, like, for us, we like to go local as well, right? We like to understand what is around us. If you're selecting lumber, we would go for local mills versus like shipping it from across the country or even like across the ocean. We like to go for what is readily available to us, and our projects are also very contextual. So depending on the site, we want to understand what we can get from around the site, and that also kind of adds to the value of the project as well. Yeah.
And how are you said you're responsible for the budget. So how are you balancing, which materials to bring in, and how are you looking at a budget to make sure you are creating that level of luxury, but also bringing in sustainability, elements of sustainability at the same time?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, luxury doesn't mean price. Doesn't mean a cost. That doesn't necessarily mean a cost game, right? Like, for example, you can have concrete, for example. It's a great material that is not necessarily like the worst carbon footprint on the earth. And cost-wise, it's also not the most expensive thing. So even utilizing concrete, for instance, and then focusing on iconic moments of incorporating a wow factor, or like somewhere, like being more selective with your consideration of the overall design and being really thoughtful with where you position and invest in the specific spots. For example, like a kitchen, right? Being the most heavily touched surface in a household could be a great spot for that. Yeah.
And Patty, are you seeing pricing kind of even out for sustainable products in your world?
Yes, for sure. And I mean, that's something we're super conscious of when we are bringing this material. We understand how important sustainability is. And we also understand that there's a budget. And so we're not going to bring, we had a product that we launched about 12 years ago that was called Eco by Cosentino. And it was all sustainable, recycled materials, et cetera. And it was pretty, but it was a little bit higher price point than Silestone, and people just wouldn't buy it. And so we quickly realized that, changed into how to be able to source this material in order to continue to provide the beauty and not sacrifice that and make it a recyclable product that's pretty without it being too expensive.
Joel, have you seen any interesting innovations in the sustainability realm that you are really loving? I mean, that you're using a lot?
I think one great product is Cosentino. I'm not just saying it, but I'm not kidding. Like, I feel like 3 months ago, I told our team that we're only specifying Cosentino products for the great price point, and literally, like today, like we're installing like a kitchen and a burger store with Cosentino products. I can show you guys photos today. So I really like, even like you mentioned, the new product with like the 1% silica, right? Like for us, being builders as well, we're also very concerned about the health of the fabricators. And I don't think people think about that a lot, right? The amount of dust, the amount of wastage that comes out, and this ends up in the trash or in your lungs, right? So, or the environment, right? So these are toxic materials that even like, so I keep digressing, like even like the fires, right? When a home burns, that's where we realize how much toxic materials live in your house, right? And now we're going down to like microplastics and like what, like in the environment, what synthetic items you've been living in and you've been touching this entire time, right? I think that's a great consideration for the built environment, which I really like, and I'm excited to be able to specify products like that. And I can tell the fabricators, hey, this has 1% silica in there. Like, sure, take the protection, but it puts my heart at ease, like knowing that there is some form of trade-off, right, with construction, with the building, with the wastage, and I feel like all of that comes straight. I mean, starts from the origin of like what product we're using. Yeah.
And I think that's an element of wellness is an element of luxury too.
For sure.
In terms of making the home feel good.
Definitely. Yeah.
And are you seeing more, in terms of like luxury too, are you seeing more wellness amenities being asked for? And, what are clients looking for when you're designing a quote unquote luxurious home today?
Yeah, for sure. I would say there's definitely a pivot towards home and wellness, whether it's like having a cold plunge in your house or like an infrared sauna. I feel like those are things that are major luxuries, or even like a steam bath or steam shower, because at the end of the day, like your home is like your place of respite. You want to go home from a hard day at work, and then your home should be that sanctuary where you're investing your money into, and you're enjoying and reaping the benefits of that, versus spending a couple $100s at the spa. Your home should be your own spa, right? And definitely there is a big pivot towards that. Not only, it doesn't necessarily have to be products, but how the space feels and the serenity or the calmness that a space can evoke in its inhabitants. I feel like that's also something that is a little bit more touching on the spiritual aspect of what a space can create or can make someone feel. So yeah, there's many angles, and for sure, like our philosophy is always creating these calm spaces, Zen spaces for whether a homeowner or its inhabitants. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something. And I feel like looking at all your projects online that you have a flow to them. Like there's just like a ease of how you design. Is that, when you're thinking about luxury beyond just materials, how do you guys envision, like are there elements that you really concentrate on, like the transition spaces or, like are there moments that you really focus on when designing to really create that luxury environment?
Yeah, we have a really thorough process of figuring out the flow, like you mentioned, like the plan, and thinking about how the user would use the space, most importantly. And then that's where, after that's really defined and decided, we kind of start building on and layering all the materials, right, over it to figure out how do we create that canvas, right? It's almost like a skeletal system, right, in a human body or in a building, right? We kind of just build and layer on the elements that eventually create that amazing whole. So yeah, we have a thorough process. Every project is very different, right? We try to get very inspired by the surrounding, by the context.
When I think of luxury, as you were saying a minute ago, I love how designers use, what we all are used to now, walking into a space and you have that scent. And so then you have you walk in and it smells beautiful and there's light music in the background and the lighting is so important. And that creates a luxury space without it necessarily being expensive. It's just that mood. And in the bathroom spaces, for example, I think that's such a trend that we're seeing more and more people, like you said, the cold plunge or the sauna or the steam room. But in the end, if you don't have all that, you can still make it into a beautiful space, having all of those small elements to make it pretty. I just love seeing how the designers, it seems like you guys are really pushing forward to making the homeowner have that luxury space without necessarily spending a lot more money.
Definitely. Even like lighting conditions, less light can be better, Like how do you be selective with where you inject these thoughts and considerations to create the overall vibe, right? Yeah.
Do you ever have you had to limit sustainability in your projects because, like, have you had to trade off sustainability for luxury? Or have you figured that out?
I would say that we can't really control the project entirely, because if the client wants something, they're gonna get it. Like, we can't fight on it. We can definitely do our best to try to advise and suggest to a certain level. But I would say for us, definitely we don't want to put any hazardous or like non-sustainable. Like, if there's an option, we are always going to go down the sustainable route, right? And we're going to always provide and suggest like other options for that. Yeah.
And I think we've had a lot of conversations last couple for the magazine. We're working on our wellness issue about. A lot of people think sustainability and wellness can be overwhelming, right? Like, how do you actually create that? But are there small things, little things that you can do to make, a big impact in your projects?
I would say, the smallest things would be being, like I mentioned, like, what is your carbon footprint, right? Whether it's water usage, whether it's getting solar, whether it's getting gray water systems in your house. Like, what ways can you conserve the resources on the planet? I think another thing that's also getting quite popular is composting, right? If you have an option of composting your waste, like food scraps and waste, like, why not use it for your garden? Right? I think that's like a nice, beautiful life cycle outside of the built environment, right? Like, what are we consuming? What are we ingesting? What are we excreting? Like, there's so many things to consider. And I think once you have that philosophy of living your life in a certain way, you can start to really like have this overarching consensus and philosophy like in your entire life, down to the building, to what you're deciding to choose on your materials. Yeah.
I wish I could get good at composting. So, all right, I'm told we need to do some questions. It's question time. Oh, good. I think we have somebody running. Yep. Thank you.
It's so nice, it's kind of loud, to see a company that's actually making a difference versus just saying they're making a difference. When you were talking about the scents that come through the houses, we live in Utah, and the Parade of Homes is this huge home show, and you walk in and it smells toxic because they have these intense fragrances when you could actually have essential oils. You know, it's like, are you really doing it, or are you saying you're doing it? Because it does make a difference on our bodies and on the earth in a big, big way. And it's not happening enough, in my opinion. So thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Oh, one up here.
Hi there. I have a question about what you consider to be sustainable square footage wise in a home, because a lot of these bigger homes, as she mentioned in Utah, do they actually meet a sustainability standard in your opinion?
Ooh, I think it comes down to, that's a great question. If it's having oversized ballrooms for a family of 4, maybe that might be an overkill, but then again, you're talking about the dollars, right? Who's willing, if the client is paying for something like that, right? To be honest, us as architects, we can't say, I think you should go smaller for your home. Like, but do you need all that space, or should we incorporate more outdoor space inside a home? For instance, having a garden that can, I don't know, like can bring in more of the nature versus having this ridiculous amount of square footage in your house that doesn't make sense at all. Yeah.
And maybe complementing. I mean, certainly I'm not speaking as a designer or architect, but I find that complementing the space, if you have a sustainable product and you know, and your client really wants something that's not as sustainable, you're not going to tell them no, but you can educate them with complementing it with other materials and other things that can make it where they feel like at least something that they are using is sustainable, not all.
I think that's an interesting point what you said too, blending indoors and outdoors, right? I mean, I think that's a huge part of creating wellness and sustainability, and you know, just bringing the outdoors in a bit too. Are you trying to do more of that in your projects?
Yes, for sure. I think there recently has been a lot of value in bringing the outdoors inside, whether it's a indoor garden, whether it's which is a great option for bringing in light to a really dull square box home. You know, there are these amazing strategies that you can take, and yeah, you get this great ventilation, which is good for the home's performance, environmentally as well, efficiency as well, and yeah, it looks great.
Well, you can bring the indoor-outdoor with Decton.
Yes.
I had to say it.
Love it. Hey, we have a question right there.
Yeah, and I use mine indoor and outdoor. I love Decton. So I wondered, because I walked the parking lot, and I'm amazed at the technology that's going into these prefab ADU homes. And they have luxury countertops. They have great detailing, the wood walls and so on. I feel like there's a lot of sense of design that's going into these ADU or these prefab homes. What do you think the future is? I'm from Newport Beach, obviously in California. We have a huge demand for this mid-century look in these prefab homes. What do you think the the future is in that?
We have definitely delved in quite a lot of prefab design, so we can touch on that. I would say that prefab is definitely highly efficient, and in terms of its footprint, I mean, environmental footprint in terms of wastage, I think it's a very controlled parameter, and like in terms of fabricating prefab. We've done consultations with projects outside of like in Asia where we're doing 60-story prefab towers, and that's the overall consensus. Like if we were to prefab, we can do it in a very controlled environment of creating these homes versus having this waste, having this offcuts, right? We know exactly what we are fabricating, and there's definitely a higher level of efficiency when it comes to that. For sure, I mean, in California, I think like installing a prefab home on site also poses its challenges, but definitely at the end of the day, it's really like what we've experienced so far. It's like a cost game, right? The price tag on prefab homes are attractive, but we're seeing the labor that comes in with the installation poses like some challenges that I think we are really trying to navigate around right now. Yeah.
Barkley, I will say this. As a manufacturer today, I think that your question is super important. I think that is a big part of the future. Like, I think this is where we all need to really take a look at how you can become more adaptable to allowing it to not be so costly, but have that modular, because it is super important, and what they're doing out there is amazing. But we like at Cosentino, it's definitely something that we have a lot of, and we've invested a lot of time in providing the ability for designers like you guys to be able to bring into a space something that's prefabricated, and into that whole modular world is just expanding like crazy.
Hi, I really appreciate what you were saying in terms of specifications, and I'm a general contractor, so I usually see when you work on commercial projects, the specs are horrible. They were from 20, 30 years ago. You're still using the old products like the staples. So the way that I see this is, where could you make a big impact with a small effort? And that will come through commercial projects. So if you could get the Starwood properties to get all your products into their spec book, they would be building nationally and internationally. What do you think a incentive could be for bigger commercial outfitters to actually choose a product and use it? Because each of us as individuals would have this in our homes, but if a hotel would say, hey, we have all sustainable products, like if you are on that wavelength, on that same page, you can get a discount, like a different membership. Like, I'm just like thinking small effort, big impact.
I can just say from my time my job at hospitality design, a lot of hotel companies are now starting to make it standard to have. Thank you. I'm like, there's a word for that. Standard. I'm still jet lagged. Standard for sustainable products in their offerings. So Marriott has a 2030 carbon offset. Host Hotels is they're the largest REIT owner of hotels in the U.S. They have a whole sustainability initiative plus a DEI initiative. So they're really SH Hotels has launched One Hotels, which is all about sustainability. Like, if you start digging down over the past 5 or 7 years, they've really made it, a top priority. Even IHG with Six Senses and all their different brands. So I think it's top of mind for sure. And I think like a Cosentino to be one of the, one of the approved specs is really, would be a huge impact.
I just want to say thank you for asking that question. It's something that I wish we could come up with. I think the membership, something that we could come up with to really change the world of, it's frustrating for me sometimes I talk to in the hospitality world all the time, and the designers are conscious of it. The designers are specifying, and then when it comes to, the product being VE'd, like I said earlier, sometimes that sustainability doesn't seem to matter. And it looks like now with people being more educated, but I think it's a group effort. I think we all, when you start challenging the hotels or, owners or your own homeowners to asking the questions, is this a product you really want in your home or in your hotel? Together, we can do it.
Well, and I think too on that, I think it's the owners, right? And it's like educating the ownership, because if you can show that there's ROI or there's tax benefits or or whatever kind of upside by using them, then the owners, once it's all about it's a numbers game for them, right? So it's one thing to have to be a standard spec for or approved spec for a brand, but then you have to get to the hosts, to the park hotels, to like the ownership groups that are starting to really push it, but then the individual owners as well, and making sure that and I think it's an important conversation to have, because I think they think sustainability is expensive, but like what we're talking about here, it doesn't always have to mean that, and it's better for the longevity of your project. And I think that's the other thing too. The 7-year renovation cycle is being pushed, and it's now 9-10 years. So like, what are the products that can stand the test of time, and they can get the best return on their investment? It's a whole nother topic. Lauren can attest.
Thank you. Backing up a moment to the conversation about prefabbed homes, something that we've noticed, because we've done projects, and one of the biggest challenges is if the manufacturer isn't transparent about the impact of the site that you're building it on, because they commonly will try to sell you the home but not really understand the site conditions, and that can cost homeowners $100,000 more, less, and they're not transparent about that up front, and then it puts the homeowner on the spot.
So speaking to that project, so what we're talking a lot about finishes here. It seems like trying to get prefab all the way through the finish stages is what we're seeing as being a big challenge. So like if you have a standalone unit, like an ADU unit that's on one semi-truck, it doesn't need to be connected to another one. You can start putting finishes in, and it's simple, but it's when you start to try to incorporate multiple shell components together with finishes pre-installed, the finishes don't mate, you don't get the appearance that you're looking for, and then now you have to rip all these finishes out to fix all the utilities behind the walls to put them back in. I don't know how sustainable that is, so much as like understanding more about, what are the sizes of countertops or cabinets that maximize utility, or maybe creating, prefab in the sense of like components. So like you want to build an island, here's a prefab island. We've already maximized, material economy on that unit. We don't have to try to ship it in this modular home where there's going to be problems. We can ship it as its own unit for site assembly.
100%. Maximizing that is key to this, and that's something that I think it's a group effort to work together from the manufacturing side with the contractor, and making sure that we're it's a group effort. But what you said is super important in being able to be more transparent, which sometimes doesn't happen.
Well, I think transparency across all, right? Like the story, the life cycle, construction costs, just making sure that like you said, it's a team effort. So I think we have time for one more question. Any other questions? No? All right. Well, I just want to thank Joel and Patty and Cosentino for this lovely conversation, and thank you all for being here, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.